one of the things that started prompting me to think that this was more than just lucid dreaming when I started moving into a different stage is when I met this woman who had had a near-death experience. She was electrocuted by a fish tank pump, and she was clinically dead for a few minutes when the paramedics arrived at her house and, had to use the paddles to bring her back. She quit her job in real estate investment and dedicated her life to talking about near-death experiences and things like that. And I thought because she was a doctor and a professional that she'd be a great person to talk to about something so extraordinary like this.
Totally logical.
And she's very logical. And yet it was life-changing. I thought, well, it had an incredible impression on her for her to give up something that was lucrative as far as finances were concerned, go into something that wasn't about money anymore.
Right.
Which we're all, we're paying bills. That, to me, if a person's doing something and they're not getting paid for it, then I'm interested because there's something other than money driving them to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's why I went to her, and she was teaching a class at the local college, and I decided to attend her class. And during her class, she asked the class if anybody ever felt paralyzed at night. And you can imagine how I felt when she asked that question.
Yeah.
I was shocked that she asked it, first of all, because very few people at the time, no one outside of my family even discussed it. Had ever mentioned it, anybody.
Well, that must have just been awesome.
Oh, it was a shock.
Yeah.
But it was welcome. It was such a welcome shock because that was really what, think about this. I'm 47 now. This has been happening to me since I was 5.
Yeah.
To run into somebody at 35 years old who was talking about something that no one else talked about, that's 30 years of just thinking it's your family.
Yes, of waiting for someone to share it with.
Oh, it was like opening a new door, a new phase of life, which was, and I'm a very curious person, so it was just incredible, and the adrenaline was pumping, and I became so excited that my hand shot up in class, and I was waving my hand around. I said, yeah, it's been happening to me all the time. That's why I'm here.
Tell me what it is.
Yeah,
what's going on?
And she looked at me and she said, well, you're on the verge of having a out-of-body experience. She was the first person that ever used that phrase with me. And remember, I'm working at Johnson Space Center. I laughed at her. I said, I don't believe in that stuff. And she said, you can't tell me what you don't know. And that made a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, no
because,
doubt.
like I said, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was trying to just understand.
Yeah.
And when you're trying to understand, you can't close doors and you can't jump to conclusions.
Right, you got to listen.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to, your information is going to be, first of all, influenced by your wants and hopes.
Yeah.
And it may be flawed.
Yeah.
And I wasn't, like I said, I just wanted to know for me. And that's it. I wanted to know the truth. So I said, well, that makes sense to me. She said, I'll tell you what. The next time you have one of these experiences, think about me and say to yourself, I want to visit, and I call her Dr. H in my book. I want to visit Dr. H. And I said, that's it? She said, yes. That's all you have to do. Just do that. I thought, well, it's happening to me several times a night. That's easy, I'll just go, and I was really thinking that nothing's going to happen, and, or I'd be lucid dreaming or whatever, and if I even did here, it'd be inconclusive. That's what I was thinking. So, of course, it happened. Of course, I had an experience that night with the night paralysis, and now I'm rising up out of my body, looking back at my body. And I knew that people in near-death experiences were talking about a similar type of occurrence. So that's why I went to her and to a near-death person, because that was close. I knew I hadn't had a trauma, and I hadn't been electrocuted or anything like that, but at least I was seeing my silhouette of my body. Now, whether I was imagining it or not, I didn't know.
Right. It was the closest thing that you knew of at the time.
Yeah, it was the closest thing, yeah. Otherwise, I had no other place to go. So that's why I went there, and I was glad that I was able to at least find a direction to head, because otherwise I would have been stagnated. So when I rose up out of the body, now a lot of things happen. First of all, you go from being paralyzed to feeling movement, and the movement is the rising. You also feel an incredible vibration. These were question marks. What is this?
Mm-hmm.
What is the movement? What is the vibration that I'm feeling?
Mm-hmm.
And what is this loud buzzing sound that I'm hearing?
The buzzing bees.
Right. What is that? These were just questions. I didn't know. All I knew is they were consistent.
Right.
They always happen as part of this thing. The doctors couldn't tell me about this. They only could tell me why I couldn't move.
Right.
None of them talked about any of these other things. But yet these other things repeated every time I tried the experiment. So I'm writing, I'm documenting this, following my journal, and I'm going, well, wait a minute. Here's these consistent elements, consistency, repeatability, which I love.
Mm-hmm. As a researcher, yeah.
So while I was there, kind of floating there, I thought, okay, I want to visit Dr. H.
Okay.
And remember, prior to this request, I had an encounter with a non-physical humanoid thing and didn't know what it was. I didn't say it was a ghost at the time. I didn't say it was an astral traveler. I didn't know what it was. All I did was describe it.
Okay.
It could have been a hallucination, I thought. I didn't know. When I said I want to visit Dr. H, also prior to that, I'd felt things like hands touching me, like things moving around the room, shadows, that type of thing.
Okay.
All of these were accompanying this experience.
That happened periodically throughout
periodically.
Okay.
Not every time,
right.
But this was just part of, over a period of time of the experiment that I was running, this could happen once in a while. So when I said I want to visit Dr. H, all of a sudden I felt two hands grab me, which scared me.
No doubt.
Yeah, because I wasn't expecting anything like that.
Yeah, like
and
what?
Then next thing I knew, it was pulling me through the window. And going through the window was like, you ever, take a bubble bath and you poke your finger through the bubble and you watch the bubble kind of adhere to your finger?
Right, yeah.
It was kind of like that. It was really strange. The next thing I knew, I was flying. Now, I'd had many, 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 many flying dreams over 3 decades or so, but never had I gone from making a request to going into a flying dream. I usually wake up dreaming, kind of lucid dreaming into a flying dream. But what I noticed is that the flying that I was doing was identical to the previous flying dreams, except this didn't start off the same way. But it was the same exact type of flying.
Okay.
Which I thought, this is interesting. In other words, it was very familiar. So one of the things I noticed and I'm still thinking logically now, trying to at least, thinking this is still an experiment.
While you're in it.
Yes, because that's another thing. You see, it wasn't like a dream where you're just the passenger, and you just, if a pink elephant presented itself, in a lot of dreams you accept it, and you don't question it. That's what I call it, you're a passenger. But in this situation, I was very lucid, very, very aware that I was dreaming, that this was an experiment, that I wanted to find out what this was. So it wasn't like a passenger type of dream. So while I was doing this, I thought, okay, I noticed that I couldn't control the direction I was heading, because I think because I made a request.
So were the hands still controlling it?
Yeah, I still felt the hands. But I could control the altitude and the speed in which I was traveling.
Okay.
So I experimented with the altitude. I want to go higher, and I did. I want to go faster, and I did. But I was still heading somewhere. And then while I was running these experiments, I looked below, and it was incredible. The view below me was trees, houses, scenery that you'd expect to see if you were flying. And when I was going fast, the trees and the houses and the lights were all blurry, just like you would expect to see if you were flying in an airplane.
Wow.
Low to the ground fast. So everything, and I'm an aeronautical engineer, so I know a lot about flying. So it all fit. Now that could have been why. I don't know. So like I said, I still wasn't thinking this was real at all. All of a sudden, I was drawn to this house I had never been to. I felt myself go. This thing that was helping me, these hands. I didn't see them. I felt them.
Okay.
it pulled me through the roof. And what was really interesting is going through the roof, I could see electrical wiring, insulation.
Oh,
That it was not
wow.
just all of a sudden I'm inside the house.
Right.
It was like I
The
was
whole
observing,
deal.
going through the beams, the whole thing. It was
Right.
the experience of that, which was a lot of detail for a dream,
Right,
if it
right.
were just a dream. Next thing I knew, I was in a bedroom that I'd never been in, and I looked around. I was kind of startled because then the hands released me.
Okay.
So I'm looking around the bedroom, and I'm thinking, okay, where am I? And I looked in the bed, and in the bed in front of me was Dr. H sleeping. And I thought, wow, what an
Holy.
incredible dream-like experience I'm having. And as I'm looking there at her, one of the things I noticed is that she had two beds in her room, two double beds, I guess. And I knew she was married, but her and her husband, one bed was clear on the other side of the bedroom, and there was a male figure sleeping in the other bed, which I knew, which obviously was her husband, and she was sleeping in one bed. And I make a joke about that. I said he was way on the other side of the room, and the reason for that was probably they had been married so long. So I'm looking at her and I'm thinking, okay, it's remembering that he's in a separate bed on the other side of the room is a good thing to remember to verify if I'm really here. Another thing I looked at is that I noticed on her leg she had I thought it was a cast, like you would break your leg, and there was something wrapped around her leg, a white thing, and I thought, okay, she has a cast on her leg, then that's a good thing to remember, that if she broke her leg or something.
Sure, sure.
And this is something that was really interesting, and I was unprepared for this, is that all of a sudden I heard her say, now she didn't sit up and look at me, she didn't move, but I heard her voice say, "Congratulations, Al, you did it." I looked around like,
Where's
who
that coming
said that?
from?
And I thought, I've had enough of this. This is a little too intense. I want to go back. And with that, I felt the hands grab me, and it wasn't like flying there like the first time. All of a sudden, the entire view, everything visually, shifted into an intense blur, as if you were traveling at the speed of light. So in other words, you could not make out any objects, but you could tell there was extreme acceleration and movement. And I felt, and then the next thing I knew, I literally felt as if I fell from the ceiling into my bed. When I landed, it was a sudden jolt, and my eyes opened, and I sat up in my bed, and I was vibrating like crazy. I mean, really,
That's interesting.
just really like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked around the room. That's my instrument to tell me my Richter scale.
Okay.
And that tells me the severity of the temblor, depending on how much it's swaying.
Right.
But it wasn't moving, but I felt vibration. So I thought, well, that's real strange. So I grabbed my journal, and I went into the other room, and I wrote all of this down in as much detail as I just explained it to you. And I thought, and I'm sitting there thinking, wow, that was incredible. Incredible lucid dream. That's what I was thinking. This was on a Saturday. And on Monday, her class was being taught again at the college.
This could get interesting.
I couldn't wait to see her. So I'm sitting there, and finally I didn't want to interrupt the class. And I waited for the break, and I walked up to her, and I said, something very interesting happened to me. And she said, it's interesting that you would mention that. She said, because on Saturday, I had a dream that you were standing at the foot of my bed.
Wow.
And I thought, is that a coincidence? She said, Saturday. I didn't say I had an interesting experience on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I said I had an interesting experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And remember, I know it was Saturday because I'm keeping days, times, everything.
Right.
And then I said to her, I had a lucid dream that I was in your bedroom and you and your husband sleep in two different beds. And she said, yeah. She said, well, he sleeps way on the other side of the room because he has sleep apnea and he wakes me up at night. I thought, wow, another coincidence. And then I looked at her and I didn't, her leg wasn't broken. And I looked at her and I said, well, in my lucid dream experience, I thought you had a broken leg because there was a white cast wrapped around your leg. And she says, no, but I do sleep with a white heating pad wrapped around my leg because I have arthritis in my knee.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my God,